Story 1.
It was the summer and I was about 12 years old. My mom, my younger brother, and I were staying in a hotel in a large city, visiting extended family. We could have stayed at their house, but for reasons I didn't understand at the time, my mom preferred the hotel. Looking back, I think she just wanted a little space. The day we arrived, my mom went to check us in while I was left in charge of my brother. We sat in the hotel lobby, waiting. That's when I noticed him. A man, mid-40s, entered the hotel. He wasn't particularly memorable. Average height, average build, plain features, but something about him unsettled me. He didn't approach the front desk. Instead, he just sat on the couch opposite us, hands folded, staring straight ahead. I tried to ignore him. Maybe he was waiting for someone. Maybe I was being paranoid. Then my mom called us over, handing me a room key, and the thought left my mind. We went out to meet family and returned in the evening. My mom, trying to lighten the mood, suggested we go swimming. We changed into our swimsuits and headed to the hotel pool. The moment we walked in, my stomach dropped. The man was there. He wasn't dressed for swimming, jeans, sweater, boots. He just sat at the edge of the pool, watching. My mom's expression tightened. She leaned over to me and whispered, "If he doesn't leave in 5 minutes, we're going back to the room." 5 minutes passed. He was still there. Without another word, my mom grabbed our towels and we left. Later that night, we locked our door, put on a movie, and tried to forget about this strange encounter. My mom seemed tense, glancing at the door every few minutes. I started feeling uneasy too, but I told myself we were safe. Then came the knock, a soft tap, then a voice. "Housekeeping." My mom was in the shower. I hesitated. It was late, too late for hotel staff. But we needed more towels, so I cracked open the door just enough to peek out. My blood turned to ice. It was him. He smiled, raised his hand in a slow wave. I was frozen. My mind raced through every worst-case scenario. Kidnapping, torture, death. The bathroom door opened. My mom stepped out, towel wrapped around her hair, and spotted him immediately. Without hesitation, she yanked me back and slammed the door shut. The lock clicked into place. She grabbed the hotel phone and called the front desk. "There's a man harassing us. We need a different room." I wanted her to call the police, but she insisted moving rooms was enough. A few minutes later, we heard heavy footsteps storming down the hallway, disappearing into the night. We never saw him again. But for years after that, I couldn't shake the feeling that he had followed us. That maybe, just maybe, he was still out there, looking for someone else to answer the door.
Story 2.
I checked into a Comfort Inn in North Carolina for a quick business trip. Nothing out of the ordinary. Just another generic hotel room, another forgettable night alone. My company covered the stay, and I had the next day off, so I planned to relax, watch a movie, and get some much-needed sleep. The room was standard. Beige walls, a cheap wooden desk, and a bed that wasn't exactly comfortable. My window overlooked a car dealership, its empty lot stretching out under flickering streetlights. I ordered takeout, flipped through the channels, and eventually settled on watching Saw. That's when I heard it. A faint crackling sound. At first I ignored it, brushing it off as the air vent or maybe the old plumbing. But then it came again. A slow, deliberate rustling, like fabric shifting. It was coming from the closet. I muted the TV and held my breath, listening. The sound wasn't constant, just occasional, like something or someone was adjusting inside. My mind instantly went to the worst possibilities, but I forced myself to shake it off. I was a grown man, not a kid afraid of the dark. To calm myself, I cranked the volume on the TV and popped 2 sleeping pills. By the time the movie ended, the drowsiness had set in, making my limbs feel heavy. I barely registered the eerie quiet as I turned off the light and rolled onto my side. I must have been out for hours when something yanked me from sleep. A sound, louder this time, the unmistakable rustling of fabric. I shot up in bed, my heart hammering. The room was pitch dark, so dark that I could barely see a foot in front of me. My breath came in short gasps as I reached for the bedside lamp and flicked it on. And that's when I saw him. A man dressed in black, a hood pulled low over his face, standing by the closet. He was rifling through my bag. For a moment, neither of us moved. My body was frozen in terror, my brain scrambling to process what I was seeing. Then, as if realizing I was awake, the man slowly lifted his head, his dark eyes locking onto mine. Pure fear shot through me. I wanted to move, to run, but I felt trapped in my own body. Then I screamed. The man bolted. He tore toward the door, yanked it open, and disappeared down the hall. My hands trembled as I grabbed my phone and called the front desk. Security came. The police were called. But the guy was long gone by the time they checked the hotel cameras. No one knew how he got in. There were no signs of forced entry. My wallet was missing. My watch, too. But those were just things. The real terror? Knowing that while I slept, someone had been watching me. And if I hadn't woken up when I did, I don't even want to think about what could have happened.
Story 3.
I've stayed in a lot of hotels over the years, but this was the one that changed everything for me. I was 21 at the time, going through a rough patch at home. My dad and I never really got along, but that night, things escalated worse than usual. After another explosive argument, I stormed out of the house with nothing but my wallet and phone, knowing I wouldn't be back until the next day. I checked into a nearby Quality Inn. It was just a half-mile from my house, but at that moment, anywhere felt better than home. The hotel was practically empty. The halls were silent, the parking lot barely had any cars, and the only other person I saw was the woman at the front desk. She handed me my key card without much conversation, and I headed up to my room on the second floor. The place was old with dim lighting and outdated furniture. My room had that strange, stale hotel smell, like it hadn't been aired out in years. But I didn't care. I was just grateful to have a bed for the night. I spent the next hour by the outdoor pool trying to clear my head. The place was deserted. No guests, no staff. Just me in the still water under the buzzing fluorescent lights. Something about the silence felt unnatural. I brushed it off and headed back to my room. That's when I heard it. A faint knock at the door. It was so soft that at first I thought I'd imagined it. But then it came again, slow, deliberate. I waited for a voice to follow, maybe a maid announcing housekeeping, but there was nothing. Just silence. I had the "Do Not Disturb" sign on the handle, so I figured whoever it was would just move on. But then I heard something that made my stomach drop. The beep of the electronic lock. Someone was opening the door. Before I could react, the door creaked open just an inch. Just enough for someone to peek inside. "No, thank you," I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. Silence. Then, suddenly, slam. The door shut so forcefully that the walls shook. My heart pounded as I jumped up and rushed to the peephole, but the hallway was empty. I stood there for a few seconds, trying to convince myself that maybe it was just an accident. Maybe a staff member realized they had the wrong room. But then I remembered. Hotel staff knock first. They don't just enter a room unannounced. Something wasn't right. I decided to go downstairs and complain. The front desk worker, a middle-aged woman, barely looked surprised when I told her. "That must be Rosa," she said casually. "I'll talk to her." I had no idea who Rosa was, but the way she said it made me uncomfortable. Like this wasn't the first time something like this had happened. Trying to shake it off, I went to grab dinner at a nearby TGI Fridays. When I got back, I was on the phone with my mom, telling her about the fight with my dad. She told me to stay at the hotel for the night, let things cool off at home. I agreed, but something about that room didn't sit right with me. I locked the door, double-checked the handle, and wedged a chair under the knob, just in case. Then I turned on the TV for background noise and got into bed. I must have dozed off at some point because the next thing I remember was waking up suddenly. At first, I didn't know why, then I heard it. A whisper. "You have to let them in." My body went cold. The voice was coming from inside the room. I turned my head and froze. A woman stood at the left edge of my bed, towering over me. Her face was pale, her eyes sunken and hollow. She smelled of something sour, something rotting. I opened my mouth to scream, but before I could, she lunged at me, her hands wrapping around my throat. "You piece of..." Her grip was weak, but the weight of her body was crushing. I thrashed, kicking and clawing until I managed to break free. I bolted for the door, fumbling with the lock, my hands shaking so badly I could barely turn the knob. As I wrenched it open, I felt her fingers graze the back of my shirt, just barely missing me. I sprinted down the hallway toward the lobby, gasping for air. The woman at the front desk looked up, startled. "What happened?" she asked. I could barely get the words out. There's a woman in my room. She attacked me." Her expression changed instantly. She grabbed the hotel phone and made a call. After a few tense minutes, security arrived. They went up to my room, but when they came back down, they just shook their heads. "There's no one in there," one of them said, and the door was still locked from the inside. I swore up and down that I wasn't making it up, that I felt her hands on me, but there was no sign of forced entry, no evidence that anyone had been inside my room except me. Then the front desk woman sighed and rubbed her temples. "One of our employees lost a master key a while back. We should have reported it, but we didn't." My stomach churned. Someone had access to every room in that hotel. I demanded a refund, packed my things, and left that night. I never found out who or what that woman was, but to this day I can still hear her whisper, "You have to let them in."